Hello, everyone. So I'll be presenting our work, Optimal Strategic Mining against Cryptographic Self-Selection in Proof of Stakes, a joint work with Sally, Matt, and Catherine from Princeton, and I'm from Harvard. So a little bit of background. So blockchains are a distributed ledger of transactions. The way we modify the ledger is that we have these agents called miners that create blocks containing new transactions. A fundamental problem that you want to solve in the blockchain is how you can pick a leader who's going to propose the next block to modify the state of this ledger. That's what we call the leader election protocol. So one naive approach that you could do it is that you could pick one agent uniformly at random. Anyone that's proposing a block, you pick one uniformly at random, and that person is the leader. But of course, a problem is this, what we call a Sybil attack, where, for example, imagine Alice, she creates a fake account, and by doing that, she just increases her odds of becoming a leader. So that's what exactly the problem that Bitcoin solves by using this concept of proof of work, which is not new. It was proposed by Cynthia and Naor in '93. Where the high-level idea is that you require miners to solve a crypto puzzle. And the first miner to solve this puzzle becomes the agent or the leader for this round. However, the main motivation towards moving away of proof of work is, of course, the high energy consumption. So here I'm having a plot from January of 2021, where the energy consumption of Bitcoin was on the order of a country like Argentina. So there's a lot of interest how we can move away from proof of work mining. So proof of stake is a proposal that has been receiving a lot of attention. How can we implement leader election without actually using mining? Or like mining of crypto puzzles, where the high-level idea is that we're going to have a protocol that's going to sample a uniformly random coin in the system, and the owner of that coin is going to be the leader to propose the next block. So I'm going to, before I motivate the cryptographic self-selection, proof of stake leader election, I'm going to propose two protocols and show you what are their limitations and how can we and motivate like why we actually implement the cryptographic self-selection, which is one of the main proposals for leader election in proof of stake. So the first step in our leader election protocols, so all of them is going to satisfy similar properties. The only thing that's going to be different is that it's going to be the last step in the protocol. So in general, we're going to assume that the protocol starts with a random string Q0. So you think on Q0 as being a random string that's computed via, say, multi-party computation, but that's very expensive. So we're going to try to bootstrap Q0 to build a random string for the future rounds. So the way we're going to implement the leader election in the Strawman example was going to be, we're going to say, assume that each agent has access to what we call a verifiable random function, where they're going to compute the verifiable random function on this random string Q0, and they're going to broadcast to everyone. So now allow me to define what a high-level idea of what the properties of these verifiable random functions have. So the first one is unpredictability. That means that if I ask you to compute this VRF on an input X, for me, the output of that function is going to look unpredictable. It just looks like it came from a random, is uniformly random draw from 0 to 1. The second property is verifiability. If you give me a point X and Y, and you promise me that Y is the output of the VRF on input X, then anyone is able to verify that. However, only agent I is actually able to compute the VRF, but anyone can verify that. In the next step, I'm going to assume that we have access to a public scoring function that's going to score the VRF that was broadcasted by everyone. Now I'm going to define what this scoring function, which property it satisfies. A little bit of notation, I'm going to use notation Si of Q0 to denote the score of VRF of agent I on input Q0. And the score is going to take the stake of agent I. But the stake here is the fraction of the coins that agent I owns. So for example, imagine Alice owns 50% of the coins in the system. That means that the stake of Alice is 0.5. Now my scoring function is going to have the property that the probability that agent I has the smallest score over everyone else is going to be equals to the stake of agent I. So one example, you could implement this by using an exponential function where the weight on the function is going to be the stake of each agent. And that's one scoring function that would work. But for now, you just need to assume that these are the properties that my scoring function have. So our next step is, OK, now that we have this property, we just pick the agent with the smallest score that you observe to be the leader. So now with probability equals to the stake of agent I, that person is going to be the leader. OK, so this is how you pick the leader for this round. So now you want to pick the leader for future rounds. Now what's critical is how you're going to pick a random string for the next round. For the Strawman, the first Strawman example, okay, so delete the proposal block. For the Strawman, the first Strawman example, you pick the next random string to be the hash of the block that the leader of this round proposed. Okay, so now let's see why this doesn't work in practice. So the leader of this round, he can propose multiple, he can compute multiple candidate blocks for this round. And he simply chooses to broadcast the one that would give the best hash for the next round. So you're going to hash every possible candidate block that you could have for this round and pick the one that increases your chance of being the leader for the next round. So that's what we call a grinding attack. You're basically going to replicate a proof-of-work mining in the proof-of-stake protocol. And essentially here, you're going to be a leader in, depending on how much computation you want to put into this task, you can arbitrarily increase your chance of being the leader in the next round. OK, now my second example is going to be everything is going to be exactly the same as the previous Strawman example. The only difference is how you're going to pick the random seed for the second round. Here you could imagine that you could also pick the next random seed to be a hash of the current one, right? OK, now why this doesn't work? The problem now is that an adversary he knows the random seed in every round because he can compute from the beginning the random seed in every possible round. Now he can create multiple different accounts with multiple different VRFs and simply pick the one that would increase his chances of being the leader in the round where he's interested. And there is no uncertainty for him. He already knows what the random seed is going to be. OK, so that, again, is a grinding attack. It's a little bit different because now you're grinding the verifiable random function itself.
I have a question. Yes. In the proof-of-stake mechanism, if you create multiple accounts, then if you spread your stake into different accounts, then each account has a smaller probability to win this choice. So why this attack would succeed?
Now you can just move the stake to the account that has the highest chance of being the leader. Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. Yeah. Thank you for the question. So the cryptographic self-selection, again, is exactly the same as what I described. The difference is the last step, how you pick the random seed for the next round. What you do in the protocol is that you hash the score of the leader in the current round. Now you introduce some uncertainty because if you're trying to guess what the random seed is going to be for round R, you only know that if you are the leader for round R-1. because you need to know the score of the leader at round r-1. So now let me state our main results by analyzing this cryptographic self-selection protocol. And think for now, how can you actually manipulate this protocol? This was going to be our main objective here, is to understand how can you still manipulate this protocol. So it's well known that cryptographic self-selection is not fair. So in general, there is strategies where an adversary that owns X fraction of the stake can create more than X fraction of the blocks. And it was observed by Shen and Micali when they proposed the protocol in Algorand. So our main result is to give an upper bound on how, what the fraction of blocks an adversary can create. So if an adversary, so we say that if an adversary owns less than 38% of the stake, we are able to derive a function f of x that upper bounds the fraction of rounds where the adversary can be the leader. And in general, I'm going to show that the adversary cannot improve his, the fraction of rounds that he's the leader by more than a constant factor of 3. Okay, now let's me describe how you manipulate the cryptographic self-selection. So in general, if you imagine an agent Alice who has a single account, recall the probability that she's going to be the leader is going to be equal to her fraction of the stake. One thing that Alice can do is that she can divide her stake over 2 accounts. From the property of the scoring function, this really doesn't increase your chance of being the leader in this round. Nothing happened. You're still going to be the leader with probability equals to your stake. What Alice can do, however, is that consider the event where Alice has the smallest score in her first account, followed by and then her second account has the second smallest score, and Bob has the largest score. She can choose to hide the output of the VRF to try to manipulate who's going to be the leader in these rounds. For example, if she knows that her first account could be a leader because it has the smallest score, she can choose to hide it if she believes that her second account would give a better random seed for the next round. So you could even choose to not reveal any of her VRF outputs and let Bob be the leader because the random seed that Bob would provide would be very good in the future. So in a high level, that's how you manipulate the cryptographic self-selection. So in general, the adversary can look ahead in the future, simulating what what the random seeds are gonna be in the future, right? So the adversary, the Alice could say, okay, what happens if my first account is the leader in this round? That sets the random seed for the next round, and then I sample out I query my VRF on that random seed. I see which scores I get. The only uncertainty for Alice is that she doesn't know the output of the VRF of Bob. So that's some uncertainty that she has, but she can model that as a random variable. She can do the same with her second account, also simulate the output of the game in the second round. So in general, you can generalize this strategy where Alice divides her stake over n accounts, and she basically picks the path on that tree that would maximize her chances of being the leader in the next round. And here I'm plotting how much she can improve her revenue relative to the honest strategy, where the revenue here is the fraction of rounds where you're the leader. So for example, if you have 30% of the stake, you could improve your revenue by around 4 to 5%. So this is one strategy. Our goal is to understand what's the limit of how much can someone manipulate the protocol. And I'm going to give some intuition for our result. So in general, for the result here, we consider a stronger adversarial Alice, where she's able to compare her score of her accounts with the scores of Bob, even though she cannot compute it. So for example, in the first path on the tree, she can see that Bob has the smallest score in the second round, so there's no hope for her to win in the second round if she takes that path. In the path in the middle, she knows that her first account could have the smallest score, so there's an opportunity there. And we try to understand how much revenue can Alice extract from this game. So in general, the revenue of Alice on this game is given by this branching process, this stochastic branching process, where the revenue is the expected height of the tree minus 1 divided by the expected height. If her fraction of the stake is less than 38%, you can derive a condition where the expected height is finite for this stochastic process, and you get this expression for the upper bound for the height of the tree. So by plotting, here I'm plotting the upper bounds that we derive from this analysis. So here you see that there is a big gap from the revenue for our upper bounds for the one look ahead strategy that I gave you. So there's an interesting open question to understand what's the actual, where the revenue of the optimal strategy falls in. So to conclude, so we derive upper bounds for how much can an adversary manipulate the cryptographic self-selection game. So this leaves a lot of interesting open questions. For example, we don't understand the long-term implications of people manipulating these protocols. So one difference from proof of work, for example, in selfish mining, we know that it's only profitable if you own a higher fraction of the hash power, but here it's always profitable to deviate. And the one look ahead strategy is actually very simple to implement. So we don't understand the long-term implications. Now the question is to investigate alternative designs. So for example, this EC paper last year, we consider proof-of-stake blockchains that leverage external randomness, and we are able to recover game theoretical properties from proof of work. So we show some robustness to that. So thank you very much.
Okay, great. If there are any questions, we have time for a few. Maybe, yes?
If Alice will execute this attack, the network will observe, right? Because she will divide its stack.
But you don't know, like if you see two accounts, you don't know if there is one person owns those two accounts in general.
When we consider, you showed that bigger miners have, that will be stronger for bigger miners. So when there is a 30% miner, I know who he is.
But if I divide over 100 accounts, there's no way to know that one person owns those 100.
Is it possible
Sorry,
to
can I also
decide?
ask can the next speaker come up and take the, start setting up the network?
Oh, is it possible to decide the probability of the director based on the stake several blocks ago, rather than the current stake, so that we can avoid the user transferring the stake very often? Is it possible?
You mean like freeze the deposits?
Yeah, something like that.
Yes, you can freeze it, which is what our run does. The problem is that eventually you have to allow people to move their money. So it could work for like 1,000 rounds, but eventually people might unfreeze their deposits. But that's an interesting technique that people use to try to limitate this, like adaptive strategies, where like you could maybe move your stake every round and then
Yeah. Anything that restricts the free movement, maybe okay.
How do I maximize this?
Yeah, Dave.
Question there, but let's get to the last question.
But it's dragged over, but it dragged over to a weird. Sorry.
I think there's a question from Gather. How does the attack affect the miner's block rewards? How big does the interest rate need to be to make the attack? Oh, that's from the previous talk. Okay, that makes sense.
I was wondering if it's possible for Alice to do. I was wondering if it's possible for Alice to do multiple stacks into the.
I have one dragged already too, but
Multi-stack to look at.
Sorry.
I was wondering if it's possible for Alice to devise a multi-step overhead strategy for the
Multi-step.
multi-step overhead.
So I can repeat, the question is it possible for Alice to look multiple rounds ahead in the future?
Yeah, that's the, yes. So in general, the optimal strategy could look arbitrarily in the future. By, you basically assume, okay, in round R, I assume if I win round R minus 1, I know what the randomness is going to be for round R. So in general, that's what the optimal strategy would do, is simulate what will happen at round R with a belief of what would happen in this round. Okay.
If there are further questions, let's maybe take them after the session. And Guillermo, you can start the next talk.
Oh, this is fancy.